Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. We're really happy to have you again for our monthly meeting with Nicholas, our SAM monthly best practice webinar. I believe this is the 34th edition, which is pretty awesome. So thank you for your continued support and your questions. Today's topic is going to be influence your licenses for optimal consumption. So as Nicholas goes through this, please post your questions in the Q&A. We'd love to be able to address that. And without further ado, Nicholas, welcome.
Thank you, Mark. And thanks for having me again and again. Always a joy to go through the path of some success with you and spend time with you. So today's topic will be around license optimization, which is a multi-million dollar topic sometime. I will share my screen. So you should see, the PowerPoint I'm going to share up here, and I will move forward with the topics. Okay, so let's share the screen. Hopefully you see my screen and the title slide. So indeed, 34th session of the SAM Best Practice webinar. It started a long time ago, I would say June 2021. And many topics have been addressed. And we are right now in a track that we call the Become a SAM Champion with Flexera technology. And today we will start with some news. Talk a little bit about the last topics, last month's topic. Go and get some news about FlexNet Manager 2024 R2 that just got released end of October. And then we will start with the putting the context of this series of webinars. And see how complexity triggers waste and need for optimization, how licensing complexity does that. We will then, see how licenses perform optimization by design. So the Flexera ITAM application by nature will compute license consumption to save you money, but we will see together how you can go one step further with some reports, which are in the tool. We will even go one step further in seeing how you can influence the licenses to consume in an optimal way with allocations and exemptions. And finally, we will dream a little bit, having a look to next steps, or I would say the next step in solution that I will introduce a little bit and that I've developed. So last session. So last session was on the license configuration, and the recording is in this in this session. So everything is on YouTube. There is a channel which is containing all the SAM Best Practice webinars. You got actually. I'm checking. Yesterday evening, the presentation was not uploaded, but it will be uploaded in the community. The PowerPoint that we used last month, and this month's PowerPoint will also be uploaded in the community in the same article where you get the announcement for the session. Okay, so this is about last week's topic. There were a number of questions that, and so there is also the link to the YouTube channel where you can get the 34 recordings, and all the questions that were asked were addressed during the call. So don't hesitate to ask the questions. In the end, it may turn into making the call a little bit longer than 1 hour, but it's good if we have both, the presentation, the demos, and also the answers to the questions in the same webinar. So I'm going to actually stop my camera. Okay. So you should just see now the PowerPoint presentation. And let's move on to the next slide, which is about the 2024 R2 version that got released on the 26th of November. Sorry, I said October, but it was actually last week. So the new features of this release, I highlighted the biggest one. So there is one which is important, better discovery, software discovery for Unix platforms using the running process tracking. So that's one challenge with Unix. The inventory collects all the files that have no extension, so it can be quite complicated. We get the path of the file, which is a little bit interesting, but with a new version of the agent, there is a new process-driven data collection, which makes the data collection more relevant because it's not just about, everything, which has a lot of noise, I would say, for Unix platforms. This is about catching which are the running processes or identifying installed application based on running processes. So that's a big one. There is also a new feature on the beacon operational health and status issues. So the dashboard on the beacon where you get more information, and a new Oracle Autonomous Database Bring Your Own License Summary Report, which gives you visibility on your license consumption, which are on the cloud versus what is on-prem. So that's a big trend, of course, understanding where the consumption are coming from and what can be related to on-premises situations or deployments or cloud ones. I will not go through each of the settings, but you can read yourself, and of course you can go to the Flexera documentation. And the last one I wanted to highlight was about the new application installation details. So that's a report that will give you the usage sessions so that you get some understanding beyond the installed application on what were the sessions by whom. It's an enhancement of an existing report. So there are changes, that are going beyond, and maybe I will not go through everything because we won't have time. There is now full support of TLS 1.3, which is a good security feature, and just going to show that you can on the docs.flexera.com, you can catch FlexNet Manager on premises and see this feature by release, which will contain version by version all the new features. We'll not spend too much time. I just wanted still to insist on the 2024 R1 release that some of you may not have yet upgraded to. And that's the big thing, on this call, you have a part of people who are on the cloud. They always get the latest features, and that's month by month they get what has been implemented. And if you're on premise, I urge you to upgrade to the latest version. I recently had a project with a customer who was in 2020 R2, and that was really a big gap in functionality versus what he could be using. So if you pay maintenance, I would say move to the latest version, or even better, move to the cloud. You won't have to think about migrations or upgrades. Everything will be faster and easier. Okay, so the big features of this 2024 R1 were the SKU library. That was a feature requested for a long time. Basically, you can type an application name, a publisher person application, and you have a preview of 100 lines that will give you the SKUs related to your search. So you have to sort of focus and make the search more specific, to be sure that you get the SKUs you want to see. And once you have found the SKUs, you can check in the SKU detail what are the applications and what are the license type, for instance, and license use rights. Oracle got, Flexera agent got EBS, or Oracle Enterprise Business Suite verified. So that's another big feature of 2024 R1. There were some announcements in the Kubernetes inventory, a lot. And IBM, NVS, and RU metrics, resource units, on containers are now supported. So the container agent or the Kubernetes agent reads from the license service and can report these specific metrics, license consumption, directly into the license, into the Flexera license. Okay, and the business adapter, that's a small detail, but good news in my view. You can now update the consumption for a custom metric license directly with the business adapter. So in the case where it happens a lot with OpenText or maybe Hewlett-Packard previous products, for instance, you can, from an Excel file now, update the consumption for a list of licenses based on people who declared the consumptions from the from the logs or from the console, and you can directly update your target licenses with the business adapter, being on the cloud or on premises. So these are the features I wanted to quickly cover, and best is that you go basically to the Flexera documentation and check a little bit the content and the details. Okay, so I'm showing these slides every time we do a next session in this series of this Become a SAM Champion with Flexera technology. So we started with, and it relates to a number of articles that have been published in my blog on NRSAM Consulting. So you will see this today will be the live session and recorded session for for a specific topic, but you can find all of these topics in the NRSAM Consulting blog. So you have sort of a written version on one side and the live version on the other, and both, I would say, will complete. And just to show where we are, so we had the first session on the inventory quality, which actually regrouped the three dots, the three bullets you see here, dots connected session about inventory. Last month, in October, we had this session about configuring correctly the licenses. And I spent a lot of time explaining how licenses work, how you can configure them, what is the best granularity for the licenses. So have a look to this session, or to the blog post. It's interesting. And today we are reaching this new stage where we have secured the foundation of the inventory we are using. We have secured the configuration of the licenses, and the next step will be in making these licenses cleverer to optimize the license consumption. And you will see quickly what it is about, but it's really about choosing the best edition of Windows Server depending on your cluster density, for instance, Windows density. It's about some topics where you want to go beyond what the calculation does, because you want to factor some optimization patterns and make sure that you not just compute, but you compute consumption, which is the most efficient in a financial perspective. And you will see that the next topics will be about taking action, making the infrastructure more efficient to save money on licenses, and so on and so on. So this is a pyramid view of what we are doing. We started from the foundations, which are the big important topics, not so exciting, I would say. Data quality or transparency is not very exciting, but it's so necessary. And we are moving up and getting to more value. And here today will be really about money. Let's talk about money. This is all about taking and making sure that your investment in the software publishers and the applications will be shrinked as much as possible, applying the best calculations and the best licensing rules to make sure that you can reduce your spend. And this is really about a lot of money. I've seen stories with customers, who saved $1 to $2 million a year, just in Windows Server Data Center Edition software assurance, just by changing the way they were licensing their clusters. So this can be a lot of money, and you can do that with the help of the technology and a little bit of best practice. So maybe talking about best practice, this first slide is about complexity, which is by nature affecting the licensing world. And if you click on this link, you will find an article, a blog post from the Flexera site I wrote some time ago. It was 3 years ago. This article will explain why publishers, with good intentions, have tried to reflect the various situations. Are you using a powerful server? Is there virtualization which is at stake in your architecture? Are you multi-threaded, or do you need more cores, or are you using more cores? And in the end, each of the publishers, and I'm going into details in this article, have found complicated rules with a conjunction of factors, a conjunction of bundles, eventually, a conjunction of specific rules when it comes to virtualization. Oracle has this crazy soft partitioning rule where you need to license a full cluster cores when you have one Oracle database product or option installed on the cluster. So all vendors, all publishers have created rules which have become a little bit monster rules, I would say, complex and so sophisticated. And in the end, customers get lost in what they need to do or what they consume. And when they are given a choice, which is, I would say, a nasty present sometimes, giving the choice to somebody. When people are given the choice, if they don't have the technology and best practice to make the best choice and make the good decision, which will save money, they will probably take the easy and expensive path of, for instance, licensing all clusters with Windows Server Data Center Edition, which indeed is allowing you to have unlimited number of virtual machines in ESX servers. But in the end, if you count well, that's not the cheapest option probably in many cases. So in the end, that's not a trap. I'm sure it's full of sincerity, good intentions. But in the end, if you have a choice, if you don't know how to make the decision, you fail. You spend too much. If you follow and if you have things under control with the right level of inventory and license calculation, you can both optimize and also you will always be a step ahead of the software publisher. And that's one thing I've seen a lot in my career. A customer using a licensing tool, Flexera, of course, but also other tools, will have way less risks of being audited than a customer who is in a chaotic situation. So this is sort of a shield to have a licensing tool and also a shield that will allow you to save money. And that's all the goal of today's session, is to understand what are the optimization patterns and how you can reflect them into Flexera One ITAM or into FlexNet Manager with the tools that you have available for that in the tool. Okay, so last session was about licensing and configuring the licenses. And as a reminder, licenses are the heart of the SAM reactor, I would say. Very important to configure them correctly. And that was the full content of the last session. And once you configure correctly your licenses, you already get a level of optimization. So I will show you today how to go one step further. But just by using the tool out of the box, you get a very good level of optimization, which is reflected in multiple cases. So first, this application license priority, it's interesting. It's if you have multiple deployments or multiple versions of an application which have been deployed, if you have multiple versions of the licenses you purchased without maintenance, so typically you have SQL Server 2014 and SQL Server 2016, and some maintained SQL Server that you can use with the 2022 or 2019 deployments. By design, FlexNet Manager and FlexR1 ITAM will compute what is the best license to cover each deployment given the, I would say, version proximity. So this automatic, this is part of the algorithm when you reconcile licenses. The goal is to always allow the most recent licenses, still covered by maintenance, for instance, to be able to cover the most recent deployments so that you can optimize the coverage of your deployments at installed applications with licenses. So that's the first setting, but there are many other, these are all these subtleties for licensing. For instance, the right for second use. Where is it? Here, you see that's one of the use and rights tab of a license. You can set up the second use on a work laptop. That's a rule that was used for, project or Visio or Office when it was not, part of Microsoft 365. The tool is able to compute and basically deduplicate when a user has two computers. FlexNet ITAM, FlexR ITAM will apply this second user right. What else? On the bundling side, that's a quite complicated topic. You have here an example of a bundle. When you create licenses, particularly when using SKUs, you can create the license which will have a bundle with primary products. Here it's the DB2 application and supplementary ones. And automatically, again, this is part of the algorithm. The algorithm will try to optimize the way bundles are computed so that you spend less money. The last one I wanted to maybe develop a little bit are virtualization rights. That's a classical one, but for instance, on SQL Server Enterprise Edition, you can license as many VMs as you want if you have the Enterprise Edition. So installed with SQL Server, of course. So the calculation will factor this virtualization optimization if you have, let's say, 15 virtual machines on a small host. Okay, so this is out of the box, and you can check the savings on the report, which is called the Saving Through Product Use Rights. Maybe I will just show this report. Okay, so I will show this report. I'm not sure where to show it from. So let's see on this instance, for instance. So you go to this optimization folder. You see that there are a number of reports that exist here, and we will go through these reports because they are important to assess the potential optimization. And if you click on this one, I'm not exactly sure of what I will see here, but because I've not run it on this specific instance, but you see that each of the optimization which are factored by the license, second use, for instance, I'm not sure we'll get some here. I've none, but you see, what downgrades, for instance, rights allowed you to cover. So that's an easy one. You will see what second use allowed you to save, or maybe covered VM installed if you have unlimited virtualization rules. So this report will give you I would say, provided you have a cost associated to your licenses, we'll provide you an equivalent of the saving you got with the way license consumption have been calculated versus the very basic Excel thing that you could do, where you would always count one installation equals one without applying downgrade rights or virtualization rights, for instance. So that's a way you can track the sort of out-of-the-box savings that you got with the tool, with FlexNet Manager or with ITAM. But you may want to go one step beyond, because there are some rules which are complicated, and that actually require some analysis, some decisions, I would say, and that's why there are some software asset management consultants or SAM managers who know what they do and can go beyond the automation of the tool. So some additional questions will require the license skills, or will require license skills analysis. For instance, what is the optimal edition for my virtualized applications or virtualized environments? Can I use SQL Server Enterprise every time I see a host which has a mix of virtual machines installed with SQL Server? Is it better to use the edition, standard edition on the VMs which have standard edition and enterprise edition on the others? Typically, should I use Windows Server Data Center Edition or a Red Hat Enterprise Linux for data center? When I have virtual machines on ESX servers, these questions are actually quite complicated and can be addressed thanks to what we will see later, some reports that give you some analysis. Another question is, in which case can I exempt my servers from consuming? An easy case is, for instance, if you have MSDN, so Visual Studio plus the subscription, you can license the servers which are non-production, provided each of the user has a subscription for MSDN, which is not so obvious. So you may be in a case where it's more complicated. My US data centers should be covered for non-production systems by MSDN, but my APAC or European data centers are not, because I know that locally the IT team did not purchase subscription for all the users. So that's the type of question. And of course, if you start not counting license consumption for SQL Server or Windows Server on non-production systems in some areas, this is a big saving, because these applications are typically $5,000, $10,000, or $20,000 per server. Last question. Should I use my maintained licenses, or can I use legacy licenses? And there are plenty of rules which are complicated, such as Microsoft 90 days, for instance. You can't use on a virtualized infrastructure, you can't use a license which has been used for a given virtual machine. You can't move the license to another host for 90 days if the license is not covered by software assurance. Which means, this is true for a SQL Server or for Windows Server, which means that in the end, potentially, an old version of an application, if a VM is, let's say, installed with SQL Server 2014, if you want to cover this virtual machine, and the machine can move across, let's say, 5 ESX servers in a cluster, the rule by Microsoft is, because you're not sure of where the virtual machine will navigate, you should license each of the ESX server as is all of the VMs installed. It looks in the end like the Oracle licensing. You should license each of the ESX servers and make sure that your coverage in licenses, non-maintained licenses, takes the worst case, which is all the VMs move to a given ESX server. So these are super complicated questions, and of course, The out-of-the-box license consumption is not taking all of these aspects into account, and you may want to to go one step further and make some analysis so that you can take the right decision. And once you have done these, once you have answered these questions, which are complicated, you will be able to use allocations and exemptions, which are out-of-the-box features of ITAM. You will be able to use these allocations and exemptions to influence the license consumption. So for instance, an allocation, when you allocate a server to a license, we just, I'm sure everybody knows what an allocation is, but I will go, let's say, on this instance. I will open the license. For instance, if I'm saying, let's say, let's go here, for instance. So if I'm saying I want a server was, potentially installed with, let's say, Windows Server 2012, an old version of Windows Server, potentially it could be able to consume from a number of Windows Server licenses. So here I'm showing, which are the applications covered by this Windows Server Standard Edition license. So potentially any of the licenses which are covering the 2012 version could be used to cover this virtual machine. If I want this VM to be, in priority consuming from this license, you can. There are many ways of doing that, and you will see there is a full session of the SAM Best Practice webinar on that. But you can pick up the virtual machine. Let's take Windows Server. Okay, taking this one, for instance. And by adding the device into the license, so this is what we call an allocation. There are multiple ways you can allocate. It can be, a simple allocation where the installed application will trigger a consumption. It could be a permanent allocation. For instance, if you cannot inventory a server, but the application is on it, you can use this permanent allocation. It will behave like if it was installed with one of the applications covered by the license. And once you do that, the next recalculation will prioritize this server from consuming from this license, and you have influenced it. And you will see there are ways which are more interesting than picking up one by one or using a business adapter, where you can, for instance, do mass batch allocations, or even use a script or use a screen. There is a screen that allows to do mass allocations. But in the end, an allocation will raise the priority for the server consuming from the license it is allocated to, provided it is installed with the application in scope, for instance, Windows Server. So that's the first type of influence. You push the script, the algorithm will take in priority the servers which have been allocated for a given license consumption. Second type of influence you can do is an exemption. An exemption, in the end, is an allocation that consumes zero. So be careful. Don't combine, on two competing licenses, allocations and exemptions. The typical use case, is production, non-production. If you exempt from the production license the non-production servers for, let's say, TIBCO or, their products or IBM products like that, if you exempt on one side and allocate on the other, the exemption will win because it's cheaper not to consume than to consume. So in the end, you will have never any consumption on your production license because the exemption of the non-prod license led to having the installed application covered by the non-production license for zero consumption. So hopefully I'm not losing you, but that's important to keep in mind that an exemption is just an allocation which has even priority over an allocation because it's consuming zero. And in the end, that's a very powerful way. You can avoid counting consumption for something which is not worth. Typically, I will share some real life experience. I spent the week on Oracle middleware license position. And Oracle middleware is a nightmare because WebLogic is included in Siebel. It is included in, in Hyperion, for instance. And the fact that you can automatically exempt some servers from consuming some licenses based, for instance, on the application they've been set up for, if you're lucky, the naming conventions of the server will reflect which application they're dedicated to. So typically, you can use an exemption which will exempt from consuming WebLogic any server which name contains CRM XXS, for instance, and that's very powerful of not counting WebLogic consumption when it's not useful. So of course, it's a very quick time to value because it's an exemption will avoid counting some consumptions and paying some licenses. So there is a full session, which is okay. So a full session on the use of allocation and exemptions. When was it? It was in 2023. Have a look to it. You will deep dive. We have no time today to deep dive completely, but that's very important to understand, how you can use these allocations and exemptions. So, but before you allocate or before you exempt, you need to understand what you need to allocate and what you need to exempt. And that's what the SAM Optimization Hub has brought. So as a consultant for 7 years, I have developed and shared in the community some optimization reports for Windows Server, SQL Server, Red Hat. And then as a product manager, I've spent a lot of time building this SAM Optimization Hub that I hope everybody knows. And you will see that the hub actually leads to some optimization reports. And the optimization reports make the full analysis on what what should be covered by what if we talk about the left part of this optimization hub. So there are two parts, in the hub. One is how much you can save by being just clever in the way you allocate or in the way you prioritize the licenses for the consumptions on the. It's all about virtualization on the physical or on the VM hosts and the virtual machines. And the right part, which actually we will insist on in the next session, maybe in 2 sessions, is about how you can change your infrastructure to consume less. So an easy topic is Oracle. If you have one Oracle VM in a huge cluster which has advanced compression, that's a bad idea because you need to pay for the full cluster. So this right part, which very often shows more millions than the left part, will be about required changes, so taking action to have changes. While here it's about how you compute a better way to basically splitting between editions of Windows Server or Red Hat, Enterprise Linux or SQL Server to actually consume less by just counting consumption a different way. So I'm going just to show what it looks like. Is there any question, maybe, Mark?
Yes, there's you were on a roll, so I didn't want to disrupt, but there's been some good ones. One was, can you share the YouTube link, which I did, so we've taken care of that. Do you plan to further developments which would allow to see the license also usage of commercial Java or other commercial software from containers?
Yeah, so Yeah, this one I don't have the answer yet. I know the Kubernetes and Docker license consumption so far is so Flexera covers the inventory side of things. I know IBM consumption that was one of the announcements on the new metric is actually captured from the license server, the IBM license server. And when I left Flexera 1 year ago exactly, we had a plan for managing SQL Server, which in the end is quite simple because it's about licensing the hosts which have the containers cores. So it looks like a classical SQL Server Enterprise Edition. I'm not sure at this stage you can get inventory from the containers showing where Java is, knowing that today, a commercial version of Java means that you need to license your full estate or all your users since 2023. So it's a little bit all or nothing, but I'm not sure there is some work at this stage on the, converting installed applications on containers into license consumption, because the rules are super complicated based on the fact that a container can be on and off 3 times in an hour. So in the end, it could be like SQL Server full capacity consumption. Just the host infrastructure must be licensed. But I'm not sure. This is planned. But good question to ask maybe to product managers or opening an ID on that. There is the ID side, but I'm not sure it's in plan right now.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's probably one I can take away and get a response to. In the meantime, I did share that we did an episode on Java, so I shared the link with that. Just from that topic.
But container, it's a specific aspect of Java which was not covered in this one. But yes, all the rest, the Java session, that's good if you share the link. Yeah, good.
Yeah, and then last question here. And by all means, others, if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat so that we can address them. So can you allocate or exemption on all license types specifically if it is available for site?
Yeah, so that's what I'm going to show as the next step.
Oh, perfect.
That actually we have intelligent allocation, intelligent exemption. And you will see that it opens unlimited ways of influencing or restricting licenses. And that's actually already released. So yes, the answer is definitely yes, but let's have a look. Let's have a look to it.
Yep, that was the last question. Cool.
That was the last? Yeah, okay. Yep. Good. Okay, so I'm going to just quickly, still on this demo system, it's a sandbox. There is, hopefully everybody already had the curiosity of clicking on this, which is called the SAM Optimization Hub. This is the first of the hubs that I released as a product manager. And the idea that, and it's not, for any application, but on the left part, this is a little bit hard-coded. It's about Windows Server, SQL Server, and Red Hat, which have complicated optimization patterns. And on the right side, it's more, Oracle optimization, and then any named user license optimization. And if we focus on the left side, the idea that you have a full explanation, which helps you and helps you understanding and going through these optimization concepts. But if you click on this 465,000 euro of potential saving, or actually saving that you can make if you make the clever decisions on what server to cover with what edition of Windows, you can here, run this report. So of course, we are not in a huge instance here, but basically, so there is a full session on Windows Server. I will give you the link at the end of this session, but basically Windows Server, there was at a stage, this 90-day rule, which was a pain because you don't know what happened in 90 days, but yes, Flexera found a way, or I found a way to have the report catching the peaks of number of VMs over 90 days. So the report is assessing each ESX server and is trying to see what is the best licensing between the 90-day peak, between the number of VMs, which is a rule that has been introduced in 2022, October 2022, and compares, what would be the cost in data center edition and standard edition. And in the end, the report will do computation of what is the optimal license for host per host. So it's really, analyzing host per host. But fortunately, and that's what I wanted to show, very often in IT, you work on clusters. There are some clusters which are specialized on the Red Hat Enterprise Linux, which have high density, 25 virtual machines of Red Hat per host. Great. In Windows, you have also some high density servers. And here, for instance, you see, the peak number of VMs on this host was 24. This is the date of the peak. So you see here that, there are 75 VMs on the cluster. The report even, catches if there are some, not inventoried VMs. So it's one of these many columns, but it catches also the VMs which have been reported by vCenter, but not by the agent. So in the end, the report will compute host per host, check the VMs, check the cost of licensing in one way, data center edition, or on the other way, Windows Server, and will compute a recommended license consumption, knowing that the cost per license actually is read from your actual licenses, which are covering Windows Server. And here, it's computing that core infrastructure server is needed because you have a number of SCCM, so System Center VMs on the host and in the cluster. So it will compute the fact that it's better to use a core infrastructure server than just Windows Server. So in the end, and I could spend for hours on that, you see here, this is a classical threshold. Yeah, the report even has some default values. If you didn't put some values, it will take, the level, it's a level D select agreement costs. What is important is what is the threshold between standard edition and data center edition. And in the end, the report will compute host per host, cluster by cluster, what is the optimal license. And here, when you see, for instance, that, this cluster, 100%, so here we have small clusters, but 100% of the hosts of these clusters would be efficiently covered by data center edition. And you will see that there are 4 reports. I'm not going to go through each, but the goal of each of the report is to tell you what is the best edition of the license to cover the hosts and clusters. Once you know what is the best edition, and this is always, a very basic thing, which is high density clusters for SQL Server or for Windows Server or for Red Hat Enterprise Linux will be better covered with the data center editions or SQL Enterprise, while low density clusters, which are very often happening and which customers don't always consider, would be better to cover with standard edition licenses. And in the end, if what you see in the hub is the difference between covering everything in clusters with data center edition or SQL Enterprise versus the mix that the report is giving you. So once you know the mix and what is the split between which hosts and clusters would better be covered with data center edition and others with standard edition, you have at your disposal the the way of allocating automatically, or there are multiple ways you can reflect these recommendations from the reports in the real calculations of the licenses. So first, you can do a license position just from a report. Why not? It's worth, spending 2 days on this report for Windows Server, for instance, before your true up, to take the ideal consumption and keep all the proof of your consumption at the time you took the decision. And I've seen customers, it started actually, the first report I did for Windows Server optimization was in 2016, and the first customer who used it in Germany saved 1.6 million a year. So it is worth using the report or even just the report. But if you want something more productized or more industrialized, if you want to do a chargeback based on who is consuming what, of course, you need the license to be as clever, with quotes, as clever as the reports, and you can actually reflect the consumption on the licenses. So one way which is a little bit easier on premise is to do some daily allocations. You can have a script which is computing which are the best licenses. Basically, it's taking the script of the reports, computing what is the best licenses for each of the hosts and VMs, and then allocating with a script or with a business adapter that reads from a database, for instance, and you do these mass allocations. A more, I would say, a practical and an easier way to do that is to use the intelligent allocation. So intelligent allocation is, I'm going to show that. I'm going to show that in the screen. And that's a feature that got released back in 2023. And to be honest, as a consultant today, this is the feature I'm using the most with FlexNet or with Flexera One. So what is that? Just need to go on the right one. Okay. So I will use my local on-premise instance. So when you have a license, you can actually influence the license not just by manual allocations or allocation that you would have performed with a business adapter or a script. You can actually use a report, which is what we call the intelligent allocation. You can use a report that will compute or that will restrict or make automatic allocations based on the report results. So I'm just going to take an example. So I'm just looking for, in this instance, which are the licenses which are using restriction reports or allocation reports. So the idea is that or maybe let's do that from an existing license. Let's say you have identified that cluster, and that was the case actually. If I show the SAM Optimization Hub, this cluster has 100% of the VMs, small cluster, on four hosts. So there are actually 75 VMs, which is quite a lot. These 75 VMs should be, consuming from the data center edition license because it's optimal, and you get here, even the saving. What is the saving host per host? So you get, big savings by using this. Actually, no. Here we are using data center edition, so there is no saving. But on the case you would use standard edition, it would be cheaper. So once you know that, let's say, standard edition license should cover actually not this cluster, because this cluster was better with data center. You can actually, on the restriction tab of the license, you can pick up any report And let's say, sorry, I'm not on the right part. This is called the device group. And here, when I'm opening this list, I'm catching the full list of reports which are starting from devices. And here, I could have a report which says cluster A, B, C, D, and cluster A, B, C, D. Also, all VMs belonging to cluster A, B, or C, or D. And if I'm creating a report which is catching all the VMs from this cluster which have low density, with the report, I was able to understand that they have a low density, so few VMs, and would be better covered by Windows Server Standard Edition, for instance, here, these two hosts. So here, I can create a report. I have a full session on how to create reports. I will not do it now, but you can create a report which will, take all the VMs that belong to this cluster, and cluster this cluster, and another one, and a third one, which have low density. And the good thing is that the target you create with this device group, which is a report, is dynamic. So if you add more VMs to the cluster, maybe you need to reassess that the density has not gone up too much, but the dynamic changes will be reflected by the target of the restriction, which will adapt to the new VMs eventually that would be implemented. So I will not spend too much time, but this is extremely powerful. And for a site license, for instance, you could restrict a license only to the site, let's say the New York site. So any restriction existed for a long time on the corporate units, cost centers, or locations, but you can now do them, based on multi-filtering reports, which will allow you to manage the complex situations for MSDN, for instance, or cluster level. Once you get the analysis that gives you which cluster would be better in which edition of the license. So what we miss are flags and attributes in reporting that would help, filtering the right way. So typically, if we had an attribute of the hosts, which would be the number of active Windows Server VMs, that would be great. And that's maybe, where I'm moving to the next step, which is using intelligent allocations or exemptions or restrictions, which are using reports, becomes even more powerful when the reports become even more powerful. And that's, I'm going to show things that are not yet in the product. So if you're a cloud customer, it will not happen yet. If you're on premise, I can absolutely implement that. That's just a script to run to extend the reporting object. But you can actually, and just as a forward, all the reports that at a stage were just solution in the community became part of the product. So what I'm showing here is going, hopefully, one day be in the product. So everyone, including cloud customer, will be able to use them. But I found this solution with my on-premise customer to have actually automated optimization computed permanently without having to reassess the reports and so on. For instance, I created a number of active Windows Server on the host as an attribute. So here, I have a core infrastructure server. This is a true license of a true customer. And the license is using a restriction report, which is all the VMs and hosts which have less than 9 VMs on the host. So basically, I created a report which is using this object, reporting object. And this reporting object actually is not an out-of-the-box one. There is one which is called, VMs, but you don't know if these are VMs of which operating system. Are they active or not? Not sure. So here, you can create a specific new attribute of the inventory device. And this specific inventory will give you the way of filtering based on what you want to do. For instance, I want the data center edition will be for all the hosts which have more than 9 VMs on the host. So in the end, you get a dynamic restriction of the license, which is recalculating what the report was doing, but it is doing it directly from the out-of-the-box report. So you won't have to change the setting or the allocation or the group of virtual machine will be recalculated every time. I'm just finishing with two last things. One which is, for instance, other optimization reports. This is a VMware PLU. So VMware is changing the licensing right now, but there are still many customers using this PLU, which is either number of OSIs or number of CPUs. And this report, for instance, is analyzing the average number of OSI per processor, knowing that there is a 15 threshold. And with this report, you can get the cluster level analysis, but also host per host. And again, once you know what is the best metric for licensing a host with a vRealize, for instance, it will be very efficient because you can either cover with OSIs or processors, depending on the density of VMs. And the last thing I wanted to show is something that you can see, on the Power BI. I have a solution, Power BI solution, which is doing cluster level analysis. So here, that's interesting. You see the size of the bubble is the number of cores of the cluster, and the horizontal and vertical abscissa and ordony are about how many VMs you have in Red Hat and Windows Server. And here, this is an issue because this one is a big cluster which has a large number of VMs in data center, in Windows Server, and also quite a large number of VMs in Red Hat. So this is not an optimized cluster. So with these two bidimensional analyses, which is analyzing the density, you can understand cluster by cluster what are the issues. And again, this one is about Oracle optimization by cluster. So visualization will help in the reporting, and again, will help you making the right decisions for the allocations and the restriction, possibly using the intelligent allocation through reports. Okay, so I just wanted to finish with some references. You will just get that with the PDF. There is a full SAM best practice webinar on the SAM optimization hub. There is another one on using allocation and exemption. You can go to the recording. Another which is doing a Windows Server or CIS optimal position in 1 hour. This is exactly the topic we discussed. And also, the link to my blog, where you can get the sort of written version of what you just got, and more, and many other posts. Thank you.
All right.
So are there more questions?
Yeah, there was a few more that came in, but again, you were on a roll and I didn't want to disrupt. See, we finished off on the allocation of exemption license, and then can file evidence be enabled for a specific group of agents/servers, or is configured globally? Enable it for all or for none?
Yeah. So if you're on premise, you can, there is a table called I shared a solution which allows to extend the file evidence or So I shared the solution. There is a full session on how to manage unrecognized applications. And there is a way, if you're on premise, to insert into a table, which is called the beacon property value. And this table contains pairs of targets. And you can say, for instance, for this target, which is all the servers in this area, I want to that there is an include file, which is one of the command lines you can run on the scanner. But you can actually store in this table and say, for this target, I want this include file, which would be, let's say, java.exe, if you don't want to have java.exe collected everywhere. So you can actually fine-tune the way each agent knows which files to collect from, but it is restricted to the out-of-the-box file extensions. So for instance, if you want to collect a jar file, only for a specific jar file, you will need then to, if you're on-premise again, you will need to customize the reader, which is actually filtering from Inventory Manager the list of file extensions you are collecting. So it's a little bit tricky, but yes, it's absolutely feasible. You don't need to do a massive specific file collection for all your computers or servers. You can define that by target, but it requires a little bit of SQL. Maybe you can contact me if you want. If you want to exactly know how to do it.
Cool. Okay. As my track coach used to say, one left, two to go. So here's hello. I'm a new user to Flexera. Where does the cost come from on the SAM optimization hub? That is be shared. Is that to be shared? So I guess on the SAM hub.
Yeah. So actually, it works report per report. So if I go to this Microsoft server optimization, if you go to the documentation, I spent a huge time, writing the documentations of these reports, and this documentation, if it opens, view documentation, okay. This documentation tells you, where the price is coming from. It's a little bit complicated, but let's see. There are more columns that I didn't show, which are in the column chooser. And okay, Okay, next. Okay. So, basically the report looks for the license, which is covering Windows Server or SQL Server or, Red Hat Enterprise Linux. And then it takes, if the license exists, which needs to be the largest number of this is the largest number of entitlements. The license is maintained, and it covers this, either Red Hat or SQL Server or Windows Server. And then, that's a cascade that is everywhere in the tool. The amount cost of a license is, either the overridden cost or the cost of the last purchase, or the last purchase. And if there is nothing, that's where I was a little bit. I prefer showing something wrong than nothing. So if there is nothing, it puts a default value of 485, which is the SelectD cost of a, for instance, CIS data center license per core. So first, trying to catch from your license. If it doesn't find, it just threw a number, which is a reasonable number, but that will be used for the thresholds calculations and the proportions between standard edition and data center, for instance. Okay.
Cool. All right. And then there's just, I think, one last question here. Now with the individual virtual machine license model, is the report useful? And then she did a quick correction. I mean, for Windows Server or CIS licenses.
Yeah. So yes. So interestingly, there are still cases where the report recommends to use the 90-day peak. Typically, if you have virtual machine with 32 cores, I have not seen that a lot, but I've seen it. And Microsoft says, you have the choice. If you have an active software assurance, you have the choice between using the licensing per VM, which has a minimum of 8 core per VM, or doing the old licensing, which was, licensing your counting the standard edition the old way. And in most of the case, the per VM licensing is more interesting than the 90-day peak. However, very often, if you have, let's say, more than 10 VM on a host, it will still be more interesting to use the data center edition, which is not per VM, than the standard edition per VM. So basically, between standard edition per VM and standard edition 90-day peak, 95% of the case, the per VM licensing will be cheaper, except if you have a very strong VM with 32 cores, for instance. And but still, between the per VM and the data center edition, there are still many cases where a high density cluster is more interesting to be licensed with data center than per VM. And this per VM metric is factored. I did that it was in December 2022. So the report will compare, is it cheaper per VM or 90-day peak when it takes the standard edition case.
All right. That wraps up the questions.
Okay.
I don't know if we had a chance to let folks know that we'll be taking a break in January and we'll be back in February. I want to make sure I shared that. And I think that's a wrap.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for attending. And you can find, all the recordings on YouTube or in the community as well. We post the recordings.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Have a great holiday.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
See you in February.
Bye, Mark. Bye.